So this chapter 6 is the last chapter of the Karma Yoga section. So as you remember, there are 18 chapters in the Gita. 6 chapters are dedicated to Karma Yoga, 6 to Bhakti Yoga next, and finally 6 to Jnana Yoga, the last 6. So 18 chapters. This chapter will be conclusive for us in the Karma Yoga section. It is called Atma Sanyama Yoga, yoga of the control by the self. So it will be all dedicated to this idea that all the activities, especially of the faculties of consciousness, have to be under control of the self. So we went through these major verses, which are very interesting. He again recapitulates, recaptures the whole idea of Karma Yoga, starting with Anashrita Karma Phalam, Karyam Karma Karoti Yaha, the one who does the work which is to be done without attachment to the fruit of action. Sasanyasi, he is sannyasin, he is the one who renounces the action. Sa yogi cha, and he is the yogi. Maniragnirna chakriyahan, but not the one who is without a fire in him or without the activity. So we have to have a fire in us and activity to be yogis and sannyasis. And we should do the work which is to be done with enthusiasm, with power, but without attachment to the fruit, to the result. Yam sannyasam iti prahuh. What is sannyasa, the renunciation? Thus they say, yogam tam, that is yoga, vidhi pandava, you know that as yoga. So when we speak about sannyasa, it is basically yoga, if you do the action. Nahya sannyasta sankalpo yogi bhavati kashyana, because there is no yogi who will be the one who did not renounce his intentions. There is no such definition of the yoga. There is no yogi who would not renounce his intentions. If one has intentions, has something to do, has some wants and desires and intentions in himself, he is not yogin. He is just normal person. Arurukshor muner yogam, of the one who is trying to get to the top of yoga. Karma karanamuchyate. The karma, the action of nature, is important, is the reason of that ascending to the top. Yoga rudhasya tasya eva shamah karanamuchyate. But of the one who is on the top already, there will be a change of attitude. He will have a peace as his foundation. So the foundation of the one who is rising, who is ascending to the top of yoga, is action. But for the one who is on the top, who realized already himself, the peace is the foundation. Yada he, and when indeed, na indriyartheshu, na karmasu anusarjate, when he is not attaching himself neither to the object of sense, nor to the actions. And here we have this very interesting definition of the Karma Yoga of the third stage. So the first stage is when we do not attach ourselves to the object of sense. So our senses or our indriyas, faculties, become detached from the object of sense. When they are detached, then they are looking for something where they could attach themselves, and they attach themselves to the self, to the spirit, to the inner self. So once they attach themselves to the spirit, then their motivation is no more the fruit. Their motivation is to bring the inner self to the surface, to manifest the inner self in all their activities. That's why they disregard the fruit of action. They are no more motivated by the fruit. They are motivated by the presence of the self. This is first stage. Second stage, he is not attaching himself to actions. Now, you may disregard the fruit and attach yourself to the spirit, but you may have still preference for certain actions, activities. You like these activities, you don't like those. You are efficient in this type of working and deficient in others. I like this, I don't like that to do. I like to do this way, not that way. So this kind of preference is another, bondage upon our spirit. We have to be free from this preference, from the preference of modality of action. So it's a second liberation. So the first is liberation from the object of sense and attaching oneself to the spirit. Second is detaching from the modality of action. First, fruit, freedom from fruit. Second, from the preference of activity. Sarva Sankalpa Sannyasi, the one who renounces all the intentions of the ego, of the self, is the one who is on the top of yoga. And this is the third liberation. This one shloka, 604, is the crown of all karma yoga definition. It covers three freedoms. First, freedom from the fruit of action. Second, freedom from the modality of action. I can do any action with the same freedom. And the third is freedom from the actor, where I do not have anymore my own preference. I do not have an intention. I can see that nature does all the work in me and others, and then I'm free from the actor. So these three freedoms is the must for the karma yoga. So we can achieve these three freedoms through activity, by being active. So this shloka 604 is the fundamental, so to say, approach to karma yoga, where all three liberations are mentioned. So the liberation from the object of sense, so when the indriyas, the senses, are detached from the object of sense and attached to the inner self, and that attachment to the inner self really frees them from the object, from the fruit of action. They are no more interested in it. They are interested in the inner self. They want inner self to be present in all activities. That is their new dharma. This is kind of reversal. So all the faculties reverse. They turn within without leaving the nature. They turn within, connect to the inner self, and bring the inner self to the surface. That's why they are not interested in the object of sense and are not attached to the fruit of action anymore. And second liberation, they are not attached to any modality of action. They do not prefer to do it one way or another. They can do it in any way, whatever way. They are free to do action. So they are not attaching themselves to the modalities of action. And the third liberation, they are free. We become free from any intention. That means we free ourselves as an actor. We are no more an actor. The nature does everything. We are just an witness of it. And that one is called the one who came to the top of yoga. Yoga Rudha Stadvochyate. So when one is freed from the object of sense, when one is freed from the activities and from the actor, one is called Yogarudha, the one who came to the top of yoga. And then there are these beautiful two shlokas. Uddharet atmanatmanam natmanam avasadayet atmaiva yatmano bandhur atmaiva ripuh atmanach. May he raise himself by himself. May he not put himself down, because the self is a friend to oneself, and the self is the enemy to oneself. So it is only the self who is friend and only the self who is the enemy. There is no other enemy here. It's a very interesting play of words, and it's always Atman is used as the self. Uddharet Atmana, may he raise Atmanam, himself, Atman, by Atman. May he raise Atman by Atman. May he not put down Atman by Atman. Because Atman is friend to Atman, and Atman is enemy to Atman. We have only one friend and only one enemy. It is Atman. There is no other friend or enemy here. So these are the shlokas. They remind me of Buddhistic way, where in Dhammapada Buddha says you should build an island for yourself, which neither gods, nor demons, nor people can disturb. You have to be so firm, so steady, and this steadiness you can achieve by yourself. One can see also in this this duality of Atman. So one should raise oneself, one's lower self, by the self, which is higher self. It is by the higher self that we have to raise the lower self. Because the higher self is the friend, and the lower self is the enemy. I'm bringing the mental kind of treatment to this interpretation. Here we have these two Atmans. I'm still kind of struggling with this shloka. I feel that the self is the same, only when I say lower self, I mean that it is viewed as the self in time and space by consciousness. But it is the same self, and that is the beauty of the shloka. It is not the two selves, though they seem to be two, because one is viewed as lower, another is viewed as higher. So one is inner self, another is superficial, surface self. Self in time and space. Our body is the self. Our vital is the self. Our mental is the self. So these selves can be raised by our true self, inner self. And then, Bandhur atma atmanastasya yena atma yivatmana jitah. The one becomes friend to oneself when one conquers oneself by oneself. This is exactly why I'm speaking about two selves, because one has to conquer oneself by oneself. Only then one is the friend to oneself. Anatmanastu shatrutve vartetatvaiva shatruvat. And otherwise, the one who didn't conquer oneself is like the enemy to oneself. So we have some conquest here to do. We have to conquer our surface self with our innermost self. What it says to me today is that the inner self is to come to the surface. And once it comes to the surface, our outer self becomes the friend. If the inner self does not come to the surface, does not conquer the outer self, then one is like an enemy to oneself. We are doing everything not to allow the inner self to come to the surface. That's why we are like an enemy to ourselves. We try to survive, we try to sustain our outer self by all the means. We attach ourselves to the fruit of action. We generate the desire, anger, anxieties. Of course, we are becoming enemies to ourselves. We feel this presence of the enemy. And then we project that presence of the enemy to the outer world. We blame the surface circumstances as if they made us what we are. Though it is our surface self which made us what we are. It is our insistence on the surface self and its modalities which makes us enemies to ourselves. Does it make sense?
Yes, thank you for that persistence. I know that you said it a couple of times different ways, but as you were saying it, I realized it just as you said it this last time. Exactly. This is very helpful now that with that attachment, that is the enemy, and when that dissolves or is conquered, and now our inner self is now the outer self, that's where there's a little bit of peace and conquering, and then we can go further from there because we're not fighting a battle any longer.
Yes, we already conquered it. Yeah. And that is all our life is this conquest. There is nothing else. It's just we have to conquer the outer self with the inner self. That means we have to make one self. Inner and outer has to be one self, which is one self, actually. Only it is viewed by consciousness differently. And we see them as two, but it is actually one. Only we didn't yet realize it. When we realize it, then there will be no conquest, nothing to fight with. There will be only one being. Yeah? So there will be no other self to fight with. So these two shlokas are actually my favorite, these two. From the beginning of studies of the Gita, I always loved these two shlokas. And then he continues, Jitatmanach prashantasya paramatma samahitach. Now he increases the vision of the one who conquered himself, Jitatmanach, of the one who realized peace, prashantasya, paramatma samahitach. The greater, the universal self is established. Now, not only my inner self now, but also the Supreme Self is becoming established. I now can see myself in all the selves. I can see all the selves in myself now. It is the second stage of this liberation. What Sri Aurobindo calls the spiritual transformation. First is psychic, when you come to the surface, and second is the spiritual, when you become the universal being. Okay. Shitoshna sukha dukkheshu tathamana pamana yoho. So the higher self, the universal, the transcendental Paramatma self, is established in everything. Shita, Ushna, Sukha, Dukkha. So it is established in the cold and heat, in the happiness and suffering, in the honor and dishonor. Now look how beautifully he covered all three levels. Shita, Ushna, these is our physical being. In the heat and cold, there is no difference. The same self is established. In the Sukha and Dukkha, in the Sukha as a happiness, Dukkha as unhappiness, it is our vital. We are vitally happy and unhappy. And Mana Apamana Yoho, in the honor and dishonor, it is our mental or higher vital self. So in all the levels, there is no difference for this anymore. The higher self, once it is established, it does not take these things seriously anymore. You cannot create defamation for such a person. You cannot, motivate him by happiness or unhappiness. You cannot motivate him even by physical comforts and discomforts. He will not be motivated. He will take them as they are, with the establishment of the higher self. The higher self will be present in all the conditions of life, and will examine them and will experience them as such. It will find in those conditions, in those states of consciousness and being, something to experience, something to learn from. Sri Aurobindo somewhere says, if you are born to poverty, you have to learn to enjoy life of a poor person, because there is so much joy in life. There is so much joy in the life of the poor person also. Is it not so? We go to these villages and we can see how they enjoy life. The nature is much richer than our riches of our poor civilization. So much richer. It has everything. It has sun, water, it has earth, it has flowers, it has greenery. It gives us, it feeds us, it shelters us. Where is poverty there? There is no poverty. Poverty is only in the head. In the head. One can be totally poor in very comfortable conditions, and one can be very rich in poor conditions. But this is only to understand for the one who realized the higher self. Yeah? It is difficult to understand for the one who is not there. We always compare, our mind attaches itself to different conditions. Or if you are blamed and you are praised, blame and praise can motivate you. The praise will motivate you to do it. The blame will also motivate you to do something else. And we are moved like marionette, like those puppets, with strings attached. All these, attachments of preferences, to do good, to be better, to get a more comfortable position, to be praised, to be happy. We are in the hands of these forces. We cannot realize the self, the universal self. They are moving us, not the self. Self does not do this. So the self is present in all of them now. The higher self can be present in the cold and heat, in the happiness and unhappiness. You are seemingly unhappy, but if the higher self is present, you are not unhappy. You are in the conditions of total unhappiness. You are born into concentration camp. But Sri Aurobindo says the soul which is free, the psychic being, if it would be born in concentration camp, it would see only a paradise there. It would not see the concentration camp. It would see only those, divine things moving. It's our mind. It's our mind makes tricks with us. Tricks us into the psychological misery in search for happiness. And we lose the self for which we are made. This freedom is unimaginable to us today, to be equal in all conditions, in the worst and the best. It's really something one has to realize. Mind cannot take it. Mind is becoming silent from this. It bewilders the mind. Jnana vijnana triptatma kutah sthah Vijitendriyaha yukta ityuchyate yogi samaloštashma kanchana. The yogi who is satisfied with self-knowledge, tranquil and self-poised, master of his senses, regarding alike clod and stone and gold, is said to be in yoga. It's a bit difficult translation. Okay, I will translate it differently. Jnana vijnana triptatma, the one whose self is satisfied by self-realization and discrimination of the highest kind. Kutasthah, standing on the top. Vijitendriyah, whose senses are conquered. This is the major thing, to conquer the senses. Yuktah, he is the yogi, ityuchyate, thus he is called, who is united, who is one, whose self is one now, outside and inside. Ityuchyate yogi, thus he is called, the yogi is called, as united. Samaloštashma kanchanah, for whom there is the clay, the stone and the gold is the same. He doesn't see big difference between the stone, clay, and gold. There is no gold for him. There is stone and clay and gold, the same. It's the material of the divine, equally valuable. So that is the poise from which he is looking at it. That's why it is here made as an example. And then, Suhrin mitrariyu dasinam madhyastha dveshya bandhushu sadhushvapi chapapeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. Suhrit mitra ari udasina madhyastha dveshya bandhushu sadhushvapi chapapeshu samabuddhir vishishyate. The one whose buddhi is the same, who is equal in his soul, as Sri Aurobindo translates it, to friend and enemy, to the neutral and indifferent, also to sinner and saint, he exceeds. Savishishyate. He becomes excellent. He is the same to all. Why? Because he sees that sinner and saint are very small, vibrations or actions within very narrow spectrum of the mind. It is that psychological mind which makes them sinner and saint, friend and enemy. Very easily to turn friend to enemy or enemy to friend. Very easy to manipulate these. They are very small spectrum of our life. And he has the vision of the infinity, eternity. Would he judge somebody with small, when he's possessed by some kind of psychological, mental preference? He will look at him as the temporarily stage of coming through or growing through or experiencing something, as everybody else experiencing something. We are experiencing good and bad things during our lifetime. We attach to those experiences a lot of importance and significance, but they are the movements of energies on the way. So, if I literally translate it, Suhrin Mitra, among Suhrit, those close friends, Mitra, friends, Ari, enemies, Udasina, indifferent ones, Madhyastha, and those who are standing between, or those who are judging, Dveshya, those who are hated, Bandhushu, those who are relatives or close related to you, Sadhushvapi, and among sadhus, saints, Chapapeshu, and among the sinners, Samabuddhih, the one who has the same mind to all of them, Savishishyate, he exceeds. Now the importance of equality here in one shloka. Yogi yunjita satatam atmanam rahasisthitah ekaki yatachittatma nirashir aparigrahah. Yogi is to be united. Let the yogin practice continually union with I, the self, with the Atman, so that they may become his normal consciousness. That's what we discussed today. Sitting apart and alone, with all desire and idea of possession banished from his mind, self-controlled in his whole being and consciousness. Sitting apart and alone. This is interesting. Rahasi sthitach. Sitting or being in the secret space. Ekaki, alone. Yatta chittatma, whose self is and chitta are under control. Nirashich, without any hope. We can say even hopeless. Without hope, aparigrahah, without any possession. He cannot have any possession anymore because the whole world is his. How he can possess anything? The possession is the idea of the mind. How he can hope for something, want something, if he is already the master of the universe? What would he want to have, or to know, or to realize? There is nothing. His chitta is under control, self-controlled in his being and consciousness. Chitta is another word which is very important. It is that which is making all the impressions, or tells us or interprets every event from the point of view of our experience. We had experiences in our past lives, in our life. We know how things are. So whenever something comes into our life, Chitta immediately gives us an interpretation, a picture, a boost of some kind, tells us what it is. It says it's good, it's bad, it's to be avoided, it's to be followed. I like it, I don't like it. I want it, I don't want it. It's dangerous. And so on and so forth. This citta is to be under control if we want to realize that unborn self. The citta is the veil. It leads us away from our deeper self. That's why Yoga Sutras of Patanjali start with definition of yoga. Yoga, citta, vritti, nirodha. Yoga is the stop or is the control when you become still in the vrittis, in the rotations of citta. So citta becomes still and peaceful and calm. It is not agitated. It is not interpreting anymore. It is under control. So the one alone whose citta is under control, who has no intentions, who has no possessions, he stays in the secret place, constantly connected to his higher self. This is the yogi. He should not leave that connection with the higher self, because there is an opportunity to leave that state. One can deviate from that higher consciousness and become again normal. It's much more difficult to do when you realized it, but still it is possible.